Today we are here at Innovation Park at Penn State University. Hello, my name is Nick Burnett. Today we are interviewing retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Selden. Born September 4th, 1950, Joseph was commissioned into the Air Force July 1st, 1973. So Joseph, when did you first join the military?
Well, I feel like I first joined the military when I was in diapers because being the oldest in my family and a product of a military family, I feel like for the most part, ever since I could speak, I was in the military. So I would say officially I was commissioned from Oklahoma State ROTC program in 1973. So that would complete approximately 28 years of service to the United States Air Force.
And what did that feel like when you first joined the service? What was that feeling like?
You have to understand that when I was at Oklahoma State University from 1969 to 73, our nation was at war with Vietnam, and being an ROTC cadet, it wasn't the most popular activity to be involved in at that time because there was a lot of dissension in our society about whether we should be in Vietnam or not. Yet, because of my upbringing, I took pride in being a patriot. And yes, I wanted to be a pilot and fly in the Air Force. So I took all the heckling on campus as an ROTC cadet. And to me, every time, and even as now I look at this uniform and the accolades that have been given to me, I take sincere pride in being what I would call a knight. Or a warrior for our United States of America. So I take great pride in that. And I can see it in our young cadets on our Penn State's campus even to this day.
So you're at Oklahoma State, you said there was heckling. Was people would say things to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, you think about it, at that time we were losing a lot of our veterans in the Vietnam War, and I was in school at the time when there was a lot of societal, I would say, if you will, dissension, not only in terms of the war efforts, but also civil rights was going on at that time. We're talking about an era of which really we're talking about the late 60s. You think about what was happening in terms of our society taking on a universal value of love and prosperity, and yet freedom, because I think in terms of the dress and outfits that we were wearing, I had a fro that I took pride in, wearing bell-bottom pants, and girlfriend was wearing mini skirts and hot pants with tall boots and big fros. You heard things about hippies and the flower children. So during that era, there was a lot of societal dissension, and I should say it was at the time when the Beatles landed in America. So you're really looking at, I would say, a composite of social political issues, social cultural issues taking place in our country. And one thing that society didn't want to see was somebody in uniform. But yet I stuck to my guns and was very proud to be serving our country in the United States Air Force.
So what made you choose the Air Force
over
the other branches?
Once you're in a military family like I was, my dad was a 32-year veteran, Chief Master Sergeant. His children weren't going to go to any other branch other than the Air Force. Dad reached the highest rank you can reach in the enlisted corps, and he also competed to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, which is a tremendous honor. But he competed and was not selected, but still to raise to the rank and experience to be able to be nominated for such an award was tremendous. So there was no doubt that his sons and daughters, if they desired to go to the military, they were going to go Air Force. So to a great degree, we didn't have much of a choice.
I gotcha. So what was the Air Force basic training like?
Well, you have to think about when you're an ROTC cadet, as most cadets are on main campuses, they do a 2-week annual tour at a strategic place in which they work definitely on their physical fitness and their understanding of the military way of life and esprit de corps in terms of understanding proper conduct and understanding what it's like to have a lot of responsibility at a young age. So it's almost like military charm school, to say the least. I would say again, because we are military, one of the primary qualities that one has to have is being alert, being physically fit, and of course being intelligent, because you go through quite a bit of training once you're in the military.
What was some of the physical training of that?
Well, basically we're talking about running a mile under a certain amount of time.
Okay.
And I can recall that once I got my commission in my first base of assignment, we had to go to a small base in Kansas. I won't mention the name of it, but you can imagine getting up at 5 in the morning where you can't even see in front of your face, and you're being called out to jog for 5 to 10 miles, and then do calisthenics as well. And then along with that, in the afternoons, you'd have classes that you'd have to be tested on and trained. So it's pretty regimented. It's very organized. But see, when you're young, I love that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, I think at that time I weighed every bit of soaking wet, maybe 120 pounds, and I was looking forward to being fit, and everything I could think about was to be the best that I could be, because I was going to be an officer in the United States Air Force and defend my country.
Wow. So do you remember what your first day was like?
I tell you, first day, because did something that most students today probably wouldn't do. I found my soulmate at Oklahoma State, got married as a junior in college.
Oh, wow.
And so my first base assignment was down in Panama City, Florida, and which was a training requirement for the particular job that the Air Force wanted me to do. And you think about being on Cocoa Beach, living in a mobile home, and then your day was filled with intense training on a job that they called weapons controller, which in a sense for civilian layman terms would be like being an air traffic controller. And then coming home to your new bride, and of course enjoying the beautiful white sands of Cocoa Beach. But again, you as a military person, you have a military life, and then you have your family life.
Yeah.
And so you kind of learn to adjust to life in that way, in that fashion. And fortunately for me, my soulmate was very embracing and understanding of my values and priority to the military and to the defense of our country.
So how did you keep in touch with your family while you were
Well, the biggest thing is that I was fortunate in that most of the bases that I was assigned to were stateside, except for when I went on what they call an overseas tour. And I kind of laugh at that because the overseas tour that I was assigned to was in Canada. And if you ever go to Canada, and I know the Canadians won't like this, but as far as I can say, it's almost an extension of America. I mean, even though it's a French-Canadian province for the most part, and a lot of their culture is based on the British culture in terms of their governance of their country. I would say, strong allies are our Canadian friends, but my spouse was able to come with me, and so therefore, really, we haven't had much separation because of the military. A lot of it has been stateside, so she just simply got used to the roles and different positions that I held, but was a very responsible, if you will, military officer wife. A lot of our millennials today would probably shake at that because we're getting into the old adage of what was the woman's role back in the 60s versus what they are today, and they're a lot different than what they are today. And we're talking about the chauvinism of maleness, if you will, the lack of, well, even though there were women in the Air Force, but there was still that ism about where women should be and shouldn't be. So that was kind of the lifestyle that was existing at that time.
Yeah, different times. So what did you specialize in after basic training?
Well, after basic training, first assignment was to be trained as a weapons controller, and that was done in Cocoa Beach, Florida at Tyndall Air Force Base. Then the first base of assignment was at Hancock Field, Syracuse, New York. And what you have to envision now is being in a job that's similar to an air traffic controller, where you're in what we call a hardened facility. That means that you go into a facility and there are no windows by design, and all you're looking at for 24/7 is a scope that has blips on it, which represents aircraft, and you're able to talk to the pilots come and go. Now, if I were to go any deeper on that, of course, then we get into an area of top secrecy and confidentiality, of which I could not divulge to you or your listening audience at this time.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So being commissioned in the Air Force, what all does that entail?
Well, the biggest thing is that you have to have a college education to be commissioned, and what it entails basically is that you then go to officers training school to fulfill your commission requirements. But as I was an Air Force ROTC cadet, most of my officer training school was done while I was a student at Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. So essentially I was ready to go to my first duty of assignment once I got my commissioned. And what it really means to a great degree when you say commissioned officer is that I've made a pledge to our country to defend our country against foreign and domestic for the rest of my life. And I take that humbly with honor. What better thing for a young man to do than to give his life for his country? And I'm in it until the day I die. So, and I take that very seriously and take it with a sense of pride. And I think my parents have pretty much instilled those values in me as they have done with the rest of my other 10 brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in your beginning years with the Air Force, what kind of roles did you assume?
Well, you think about it, as a second lieutenant, and that would be a gold bar, and I was, my first base assignment was Hancock Field, Syracuse, New York, as a weapons controller. But along with that particular responsibility, I was known as I had to be the notification officer. And for me, that was no joy. It's where I had the responsibility of the Northeast region of the United States, that if any military veteran died, I had to take a color guard, go to the veteran's birthplace, and I was in charge of the color guard for the funeral of our fallen vet. I grew up fast when I was a second lieutenant as a notification officer, because when you come to a family's door and they see you in full dress uniform with a nurse accompanying you, they know something is wrong. And then when you read the telegram at the time to the family, and the emotion, of course, is related to the death of their loved one, it's a tough assignment. And then to later have the funeral in which you are in charge of the color guard, and as an officer you place the flag in the arms of the family, and once you give that flag, you look at the family in the eye and you say, this is on behalf of a grateful nation, and then you give that slow salute to honor a fallen veteran. It just embraces you to know that our country is very appreciative of its veterans. And so it was a tough duty, but it was an honorable duty that I found. But it was the type of things that junior officers traditionally have always been assigned to do when they arrive at their first base of assignment.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you served until you promoted to lieutenant colonel. Mm-hmm. So did you have any chance to see any combat type things, or?
Fortunately for me, I did not go to the front line. Although my military career spans Vietnam War, Desert Storm, Somali, and then where we are up until 2001. And it was disappointing for me. The reality simply is that I was fulfilling jobs as a headquarters section commander in which I was in charge of troops stateside for not only their discipline, but their health and welfare. And so I was in a very responsible position, but none of which required that I would be sent to the battlefield. It is something that, if you will, I regret, but then I understand the full responsibility that we have to have as having a support force back here in the States in the event that we do go to war, that I can take over those positions here in the stateside.
So you mentioned you served at Brooks Air Force Base, and the base is known to be a center for research of aerospace medicine. Does this specialty of base give you some different roles? And did you actually participate in research at this base?
What was interesting about Brooks Air Force Base is that they have one of the rarest centrifuges on its facility, and if you will, this is a apparatus that helps you to extend life, and it's also been used to address issues of sickle cell anemia for patients. Basically, the roles that I had there was being the headquarters section commander, in which I worked directly for the base commander, and the base commander wore a dual hat, one being in charge of scientific research as well as running the installation. And so I had a unique opportunity to see how and to work with our troops as far as those who had severe injuries that needed the centrifuge to use. And also there was testing taking place on pilots using trainers before they actually go into the cockpit, and that was done at Brooks Air Force Base. So my role was basically, again, a role of a commander, meaning in the sense that if a young man was smoking pot or in the resident hall in an altercation, I had a first sergeant and a staff of about 10 that would bring that young man to me. Then we'd have to administer the military legal rights in terms of punishment and discipline if need be. So to some degree, for the young airmen, I might have been called the Axeman or something of that nature, but it was to instill in them discipline in order to not violate the military, what we call justice or of law.
Being in that time of that era, was that a frequent problem?
Unfortunately, it was very problematic in terms of it was mostly pot smoking, and of course we have to go through the resident hall with dogs and our security police. But then we had some domestic violence of married couples fighting each other. We had some neglect issues in which parents may have neglected fair treatment of their children. Then it talks about, basically also dealing with depression issues, suicide attempts, things of that sort. In fact, it almost sounds like it's what I'm doing now as an assistant dean of the College of Comm, that I address different student issues. I hadn't reflected on my military career like that, but now I can understand where I have quite the expertise in terms of understanding and resolving student issues based on my military experience as well.
Makes sense. So what was the camaraderie like in the armed forces?
Well, you have to realize there's a unique, I would say, environment in the military where you have this whole thing of officers stay with officers, enlisted stay with enlisted, and there is a separation by rank of the communities that you involve yourself with. It's pretty well lined out that in the military we have to have ultimate respect for the grade and rank of the person. And you kind of get into a confluence of interest when you merge the two. And to this day, they've kind of, if you will, merged the lines, whereas you can interact with, officers can interact with enlisted, etc., when the duty requires it. And there are certain cases where off-duty you can interact, but it's really held to a strict core that, because you have to understand that if I give an order to someone, they have no choice but to follow my orders. And if for any reason they question it, they can be up for judicial punishment. So there is this whole thing about almost, in fact it's called fraternization of officer and enlisted, that one is made aware of when you go through OTS or Officer Training School.
Uh-huh. Is there any particular events that come to mind in terms of camaraderie and your companions?
Well, the biggest thing is that when you are in the military, there is that esprit de corps about being a young soldier and defending your country, that itself brings that esprit de corps in terms of you being a part of a very special fraternity or sorority, and that being a veteran. And to me, now that I think about it as we're conducting this interview, it takes a special kind of person to want to lay their life on the line for a country.
Definitely.
And to me, it really does fall into that whole category that, right or wrong, I'll defend the United States of America to whatever it takes to keep our freedom. So that in itself provides this unique fraternity and sorority, if you will, of this organization of being a vet.
So serving a lot of your stateside, I guess you got to see front and center a lot of the anti-war protests and even as far as anti-troops protests.
Yes.
But what does that make you feel like when you're serving and your own people are protesting?
It's almost as bad as, if you can remember, and it might be dating myself, because you may not have seen it being a millennial. There was a commercial one time where it showed American Indian on horseback looking over our interstate and seeing people throwing trash out the window. And you see a tear come down from that American Indian because of their embracing and love of country, land, air, water, not pollution. That's how I felt. In terms of, it's like my own fellow countrymen and women are saying that we're not worthy, and yet we're saying that we would lay our lives down for you. And it's the one occupation where I want to say that you find rare and exceptional, because it is an occupation that we know that any time we could give our life for our country. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. Are you ready to do a job, take on the commitment, take on the responsibility of laying down your life for your country? See, not many people are willing to do that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying that we are amongst a rare breed.
Definitely. So you mentioned that you spent some years at the Pentagon. What did that job entail?
The Pentagon, you have to understand, they hand select everyone that works there. Yeah. And so to me, after my active duty tour, which I ended up at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, that was a tremendous honor. And at the same time that I got hired to work at the Pentagon, I also started my career in education at Cornell University. Oh, wow. So, but at the Pentagon, it is like, when you look at that building and see the octagon shape of it, I know I must have gotten lost half a dozen times while I was working there.
I can imagine.
And so, but after, of course, the years that I've spent there, almost 17, you get to know the ways around the Pentagon. But it was a unique experience, but we have to understand that prior to the Pentagon, I was working with the troops at the base level. But at the Pentagon, you're more of a policy, more of a think tank kind of a structure. And it's nothing for you to view 3, 4-star generals just walking the hallways, where that would be a rare treat at an installation. And so my days at the Pentagon were spent as a staff officer for a 3-star general. And it was exciting. It was a lot of things we did were unfortunately confidential. But when you stop and think about it, the essence of what I was doing was providing staff assistance to a directorate, and that directorate is normally mostly 3-star general, in terms of how to move internationally people, places, and things. Now, layman terms would call it the post office. But when you're talking about a budget of over $30 billion, you have an extraordinary amount of responsibility and power in terms of working with resources to make things happen. And throughout, for example, like Desert Storm in Somalia, and when the volcano erupted in the Philippines, this particular directorate was responsible for making sure people were getting in and out in safety, and also making sure that whatever supplies and logistics that needed to be done got done. So pretty much that's what it was like.
Wow. So most of us will never step foot in the Pentagon. So do you have any specific recollections of what it's like to work there, or any memorable...
Well, I'll just say this, and you'll get an idea. And any of you could go to the Pentagon for a tour at any time, and I would definitely encourage you to do that. But think about working in the Pentagon and knowing that every day there's a bomb threat.
Wow. At the Pentagon?
At the Pentagon.
Okay.
And the thing about it is they'll take that bomb someplace else and detonate it, and you never know about it. And yet you go back to the Pentagon each and every day because you have a job to do.
Jeez.
That's just a tremendous responsibility for anyone. And yet our nation requires it in order to defend this country.
Yeah.
So to me, not only the work, but the camaraderie of not only working for the Air Force, for a directorate, but you also get a chance to work with the other branches of the service, like the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, and you get to work with other military branches from other countries while you're there as well. It's really almost something out of a dream, in a sense that you have access to the military structure of the major power of this globe, of this earth, and that's the United States of America. And you're in the hub of what drives that.
Yeah.
So it was, for me, it was exciting. It was a little scary. And there are times when you don't want to relate or share with your spouse or your family what you encountered each and every day, because you know they wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, a lot of the things that I can't share with you are confidential. And basically, I just don't know how you or our listening audience would respond, because, but it was all for defense.
Yeah.
It was all for us to protect our country in any way we can.
Was it ever hard to focus on your work, knowing that, I mean, any day there's people that would love to bomb that building?
Oh, man. The thing about it is that if you can think about a secure structure in which every door that you go through, you have to have a combination to get into. And every door that you come out of, they change that combination every other day.
That'd be exhausting.
And then you have secure blast doors, which I can't say much more about, to protect those that are there.
Yeah.
You develop a mindset, and I think a sense of maturity over your years of being in the military, that you know what you got to do. And I wish I could share with you more, because it is secure, but in order for me to go into that, then that would be a violation of confidentiality and secrecy of what takes place inside the Pentagon. But I would encourage you and our listening audience to take a tour of the Pentagon, just to go and see what they see, to get that close to the hub of our defense. You need to, I think as civilians, you need to know what takes place there. I just had the unenviable task that I spent 17 years there, and sometimes I do wonder if our American civilians know the price that military folks pay to do what they do. And sometimes I don't think they do.
Yeah. Now, without prying too much more, would you ever, for those 17 years, wake up and just think, like, I don't want to go in there? I mean, it's a dangerous place to work at. Do you ever just not have the desire to go there?
See, I don't know what, I hear what you're saying, but I never once questioned being there. And maybe that gets into that whole core of what makes us so special
I was
as
gonna say,
patriots.
if I knew my building was in danger any given day, I would be.
You would call in sick,
I'd be a little nervous about going in, but.
And see, the thing is, as I say that to you, I never gave it a second thought.
Yeah.
I knew that this was a hand-picked assignment to work at the Pentagon, and if those generals are going to be there, by God, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
And I do have a younger brother who also worked at the Pentagon, and he was there when the plane hit the Pentagon.
Oh,
but he was on the other side of the complex at the time,
Thank God.
and I wasn't at the Pentagon when that took place. But he went to work just like we all would have gone. Patriotism, honor, dedication, that's what drives us.
Yeah.
Because we don't want anything like 9/11 to ever happen again, you know? So.
Yeah, I can't imagine being there the next couple days after that.
Oh,
the
they,
attacks.
in fact, folks didn't take a day off. They were there.
That's amazing.
In fact, some were probably still there when they were assessing the damage to let you know how dedicated our force really is. But you'll never know about those kinds of things because that doesn't make news.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the dedication of being a patriot, I think, in today's military. We've got some incredible young people, and as I look at our cadets that are here at Penn State, it just makes my heart feel good to know that the younger generation, the millennials, are taking off where I took off when I was a college student, and to see the strength of them and to know that their dedication is real, I think we're in good hands for the future as far as defense of our country.
So, given on your vast years of service, what kind of achievements are you most proud of?
Well, I would say the key achievement is being displayed here in front of you, and that was fact to reach the grade of lieutenant colonel before I retired in 2001. And it's almost like one of the things is that you want to be a full colonel, which is where these silver clusters would have been eagles, okay? And that's why the Eagle Trophy is there. It was given to me by my father in congratulating me on retiring after 28 years in the Air Force. My younger brother and I both retired together at the Pentagon. And there's a coin on the flag that's displayed back there that was given to us by the Secretary of the Air Force together as we retired from the Air Force. So the main, I think, achievement that I could say was I will say, defense of our country, and really touching base, even back then, with our young airmen. I just thoroughly enjoyed interacting with our young troops, as I do now as an assistant dean in multicultural affairs for the College of Comm. There is that wanting to inspire young people to be all that they can be, to take a look outside of the box, and really, really take a look at what else can you do to be a better citizen, and what can you do to contribute to our strong American society. And not just be a lame duck and only be at Penn State, if you will, to see how much you can get on a paycheck, but what can you contribute beyond that to our American society. That's what it's all about.
So to a non-military eye like my own, I wouldn't know what to make of the badges on your jacket. Can you tell me a little bit about what these badges represent?
Well, basically, and I'll say it this way because the camera may not be able to get close enough to see it all, but what it does, it talks about each medal is representing a certain aspect of my military career. The top one is the one that talks about basically, I won't go into each individual ribbon, but it talks about your longevity in the military. So after so many years, you'll get a ribbon, and then after 10, 15, 20 years, you'll get clusters to go on those ribbons. One of them that is in the center is for, and it's the one, if you can see it from the camera, it's the red and blue. That's for outstanding unit. When I was at Minot, North Dakota, I was laughing because it is now December. I do recall in 1982, with the temperature and the wind velocity, it was 100 below zero. You could actually throw a bucket outside, and before the water would land, it would be snowflakes.
Wow.
It was that bad. You had to plug your car in every night. But that was what we call the Strategic Air Command, which was the second largest Strategic Air Command in the Air Force's inventory. And I happened to be the headquarters section commander, and we received an Outstanding Unit Award for what we did in support of our troops on that installation.
Wow.
And that's one that I'm very proud of. The other one, I'll just mention is the one over here, is the red one, and that's the Joint Service Commendation Medal, in which when I was stationed in Canada for 3 years, our daughter was only 4 years old and was learning how to speak French and downhill ski. I was also the headquarters section commander there, working for a one-star general. I can't tell you what specifically we did there. The thing with that assignment is that there were 250 American families working with our Canadian forces, and I was responsible to make sure, again, that their welfare was taken care of, discipline was in order, and basically it was considered an overseas tour, of which I still question that, but it was an incredible experience for the family as well as my military career to work with our Canadian forces. So that's what, and this badge up here is for the information management career field that I was in, and it's almost a high-tech version of saying I was, really today we have a college called IST. I was in a job at the Pentagon for information systems and computer and management, working for the directorate, which was a 3-star general there at the Pentagon. So pretty much that does it.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So, so what was like transitioning back to civilian life?
Well, the biggest thing, you should understand that from pretty much I'm going to say from 85 to present day, I was an Air Force reservist, which meant
So you were stateside.
that I was stateside, and then I worked for the Pentagon 6 weeks out of the year every year until I retired in 2001.
Okay.
And it was basically to be, it was tough because when you're in the military, you expect rank and order, and you expect respect.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get that in civilian life.
I can imagine being at Penn State. I can imagine.
Right.
Not always seeing.
So
military discipline.
even though I was a commander, even though I was an officer, and if I said, you move that chair over there, you don't ask me why, you move it.
Yeah.
You have to make that adjustment to civilian life that
Okay.
you need to ask kinder if you want something done. It's okay for them to ask you, why should I move that chair?
Yeah.
So there is a bit of an adjustment that has to occur. So I've gained a lot from my military experience in terms of organization, management, that I can use in my civilian life. You students have embraced me to the point that I can downplay my commandership and realize that that's a career that I can honorably respect, but I can put aside for now.
Yeah.
But every now and then I'll get a student that needs the commander to come out, in
I
which
can imagine.
I have to use sparingly to encourage them to stay focused and to be the better student that they can be. And then also it's to know that I don't wear my uniform every day, where I could be a target every day. I guess to some degree, I can imagine myself being like a Superman, where I unbutton my shirt and open it up, and when you look inside, what you see is my Air Force uniform.
Yeah.
Because I'm a patriot until the day I die.
Yeah.
And proud of that. So that pretty much would answer the question about the adjustment from military to civilian life. Yeah.
So when did you start working for Penn State?
Well, I started at Penn State in 1994.
So you were still at the Pentagon?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I was at Cornell Then Penn State made me an offer I couldn't refuse, so I left Cornell to come to Penn State, still working at the Pentagon. And as of this year, I'll have 22 years at Penn State.
Okay. Now, I mean, both of those jobs sound like a handful. How did you manage to balance
It's
Pentagon
tough.
work and Penn State?
It's tough. It's tough. The reality is that Title X, which supports reservists and National Guards, encourages educational institutions to embrace our veterans.
Okay.
So I was able to do my duty with the embrace of the university. Without that, there's no way I could have managed two careers at the same time. And really, it takes a lot for you to be able to manage that, because there still are requirements of the military beyond the 6 weeks a year that you do as a reserve officer, as compared to being an employee at Penn State. That you still have training that you need to go to and attend, and so you have to keep up with that in order to be considered for promotion to the next grade if you want to be promoted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever join any military organizations?
Well, there is the Air Force Association, which I'm a life member of. And basically, that would be in terms of the military, the organizations that I belong to. And of course, it's good night, I would say, well instituted with a number of our veterans that are members. And it's an organization, though, that helps you to make that transition from military to civilian life, and they have their own website as well. So it's been something that I've stayed committed to ever since I've retired.
Now, would you say your military service impacted your career choice in post-service?
I would think so. The biggest thing is that when I was commissioned and had my first base of assignment, which was Hancock Field, Syracuse, New York, at that time, I also completed my master's degree within a year, when it's a 2-year master's program. And the master's degree was focusing on guidance and counseling and education. I knew that I had a love of wanting to work with young people that early. And it's one of the things that you will find out once you get in the military is that it's a very competitive institution. So you're trying to get that higher education as quick as you can, as often as you can, because that's going to help you with promotion. So it was not unusual for, at that time, I was then a first lieutenant, to also pursue his education while being an officer, and then completing his master's degree so that he could be promoted to the next rank, which would have been captain, if he wanted to be competitive. So within that first year of my base of assignment at Hancock Field, I got my master's degree from Syracuse University.
Okay.
So.
Wow. And so what would you say to young adults who are kind of on the fence about joining the armed services or not?
You see, I'm of the feeling and philosophy that we each owe this country a debt of gratitude. I would want to say that I would encourage every person to at least give, if they could. In fact, I don't think if they could, I would want to encourage it, to at least to give one tour of duty to everyone in our society that is in America. Now, I know our conscientious objectors will have a lot to say and speak to me about, but I'm just saying that we owe a debt of gratitude to America for being America, and that we ought to contribute by the defense of her. So, to me, I would think that any young person who would be seeking, I think, a future leadership role in any job, they ought to commit at least a tour duty to the military before they get started on their own particular career path. I would encourage it. But then again, as we talked earlier, the military is really, I think, for a rare breed, and not everybody is a rare breed. So I'll give them that excuse if they want to get out of that. But to me, I would encourage every young person to give a tour of duty to the defense of our country. That's where I stand.
Alrighty. Well, Thank you for your time today, Dean Selden.
You mean we got to go already?
Yeah, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Well, I just want to personally thank Brooke and the College of Communications for making this possible. This is a difficult time for me, but the reality is this is very helpful. I feel very pleased with the interview. Just want to thank you for taking the time and allowing me to share my military career. I know I didn't go to war, but the thing is, in my particular occupation, we were going to war, but we were doing it to address issues of civil rights, because my first job was dealing with race relations, and it's where we taught people how to embrace different cultures in the military, because we were having some serious racial issues that were taking place not only on our bases, but in our society. So thank you again for this opportunity.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you for your service, and we appreciate yours and everyone else's in the military service. So thank you.
You're welcome.